Hello, everyone. I am Corey Andrew, and welcome to another inspiring episode of Motivational Mondays presented by the NSLS, now impacting over 2 million members nationwide. Now, today we have a really insightful guest joining us. He's a two-time best-selling author and host of the Learn It All podcast and CEO of LearnIt, a live learning platform that has transformed the lives of over 2 million people. That's a pretty common number apparently between us, which is really cool. And so he has a background as a professional baseball player as well, and he brings an athlete's mindset to his leadership sharing game. And he also, it's a platform that really helps people learn and adapt and helps teams as well thrive as a collective. So we're really happy to have Damon here today. Damon, welcome to Motivational Mondays.
Corey Andrew, it's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome, sir. Mr. Damon Lembi. Thank you. Now, before we dive in, you are the CEO of LearnIt, as I mentioned, and I gave a little bit of the background, but can you share a little bit more about really what it is and what it provides?
Sure. LearnIt is a live learning platform. And essentially what we do is live instructor-led training, a lot of Zoom and in-person. And customers turn to us, mainly B2B, when they're looking to upskill new managers. Let's say somebody's got promoted from an individual contributor to a first-time manager, and they don't have the skill set they need. So we help upskill them to learn everything from how to communicate better, coaching. Customers also turn to us when they're looking to improve communication across the organization. So we help design training programs that align with their goals and outcomes.
Right. Very cool. That's excellent. And also, when it comes to your own career trajectory, if you will, I mentioned you started in baseball. So before that transition to the world of business, what was that connection for you that goes, I'm going to be an athlete here and be a businessman here? Or was it some sort of continuation of that path for you?
Not at all. I mean, I put all my eggs in the basket being a professional baseball player. And, a very short version of that is I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I love sports. By the time I was a sophomore in high school, I knew if I was going to play college or pro baseball, college or pro sports, it had to be baseball. So I went all in on baseball. I was a high school All-American. And really, my first big decision was my senior year, I got drafted by the Atlanta Braves in the 13th round. And do I go to college or do I start playing professionally? My parents were super cool. They said, hey, this is your decision. I chose the route of going college, and it was one of my first great leadership lessons. I did so because our coach, a Hall of Fame coach named Andy Lopez, he set this moonshot vision that small school like Pepperdine is going to win the College World Series with only 2,500 people, and we're going to do it by working as a team. So I went there. I ended up getting hurt and leaving, and sure enough, they won the College World Series the very next year.
Wow.
Moved on to Arizona State, had a good career there, hit a home run in the College World Series, like my wife says, my glory days. And, getting ready to be drafted again and play professionally. It didn't happen. So here I am. I'm 22 years old. My whole identity was being a baseball player. I wasn't sure if my skills were transferable into the business world. And I was lucky, though. I came from a family who had different businesses, real estate, hotels, savings and loans. And my dad was starting this cool little company called LearnIt. And this is dating myself back in 1995. So I started as a receptionist there. And I did that for two reasons. One, I wanted to roll up my sleeves and learn. And two, I didn't want to be someone, daddy puts me in a high level position. I wanted to work my way up and show that I belonged. And so that's really where I got into making the transition from losing your identity as a baseball player, which was very, very hard, but knowing I got to pivot now and I got to figure out what I'm going to do the rest of my life. And I got lucky that the athletic education I got from playing baseball has really helped me ever since.
That's a wonderful leadership lesson. I love that you mentioned the pivot, because very often we do discuss how people have a certain ambition or a dream that they are going for, or sometimes they don't know what they're even going to do with life. And there's a moment where you have to sort of make a decision just to change course or alter the direction you're going in or change your trajectory, but do it fearlessly and just kind of believe that you're going to land somewhere. But I think the first step is the willingness to pivot, quite honestly. What do you think about that?
You're 100% right. I think that it's important, for your listeners out there, life doesn't always go as planned, and that's okay, right? And when that happens, what choice do you have? You could sit there and cry in your soup, or you could make a pivot. And even if it's fearful, even if it's tough, even if you're unsure of yourself, I think that it's really important for us at all ages to get out of our comfort zone and not be afraid to go out and try something. And that was really the situation I was in. I knew that I was capable of doing something. I wasn't sure at the time what it was, but I figured if I worked hard and really focused on learning, I would be able to make something of myself. And I'm not going to say I'm the greatest leader of all time, but I'm really happy with what we've been able to accomplish through a great team at LearnIt over these 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, 2 million people have learned on and have been upskilled, I should say, on LearnIt. So this champion, you as a champion of the learn it all mindset, like the learn it all mindset, like what exactly how would you define that?
So how I define that is we all know-it-alls, right? You have a conversation with something, they're set in their ways, they have it all figured out. As you're speaking with them, they're kind of rolling their eyes, right? I mean, they got all the answers,
Right.
My way or the highway. The learn it all mindset, similar a lot to growth mindset, is that you're open and you're humble. You're like, okay, I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to be curious. I'm going to learn from other people. I'm going to go out, I'm going to try things, and I'm going to, continuously find ways to learn and continue to evolve.
Well, I think when it comes to that, though, I mean, how do people kind of get out of their comfort zone, though? I mean, I think that's sort of where that gets a little tricky, right? Because many people are like, they're kind of stuck, if you will. They know what they know. And to kind of give them that push to kind of get outside of their own way, if you will, how does that play into your work? I mean, are those obstacles that you have to overcome?
Absolutely. And I've gotten better at it over time. And I want to just say one more thing. When I say learn it all mentality, I'm not saying constantly just learning, reading, going to classes. You have to execute on some of that as well, right? I mean, I had this one gentleman told me on my podcast, David Katz, who's awesome. He said, learning without doing is treason. So you have to put into practice some of what you learned. Now, and also when it comes to being a leader, you don't have to run a team. A leader can be a parent, a coach. We're all leaders. It starts with self-leadership. And to answer your question, I feel like I owe it to myself, my team, and my family to continuously stay relevant. If you're stuck in your ways and you've got blinders on and you're not learning new things, you're going to get passed up, especially in the world we live in today, Corey. I mean, the change of pace is never going to slow down. It's not going to get any slower than it is right now. It's going to continue to evolve with AI and everything else going on. So if you're leading a team or you're a coach or you're a parent, you owe it to yourself and your team to stay relevant and continuously find ways to continue to grow. Otherwise, you're just going to get passed up. I mean, we've all heard the Blockbuster story and all those types of stories, but you have to push yourself to get out of your comfort zone. Otherwise, you're going to be left behind.
Yeah. Yeah. That is one of the most common denominators, I think, when I have had people on like yourself, successful leaders. There is that moment where they all were like, you know what, if I don't evolve somehow, again, even the pivot conversation is still a part of that, because pivoting means you're willing to have the growth mindset, if you will, being willing to learn new things. Otherwise, you do become stagnant. And it's especially important in the AI age, as you mentioned, too, because there's a certain demographic age-wise that are very sort of afraid of technology. And then there's that same demographic sort of demonizes Gen Z for being such a tech heavy generation. And I'm like, no, you need to sort of embrace Gen Z because they're going to need you. You need them, I should say. But we also can give to them because very often that generation lacks, so they say, the soft skills. So there is this, I think, push and pull with all generations to sort of learn from each other and continue for us to succeed as a society.
You hit it on the point. I was talking to this gentleman yesterday, and we talked just about that, where in the workforce right now, we probably have 4 or 5 different generations, and we all need each other, right? Some people might think the Gen Z stuff. Some people might think my generation, I'm 50, what is it, Gen X or whatever, but we could all learn from each other, and we all bring different skills to the table. And one of the things, and when we talk about this diversity, one of the things I think that happens a lot of times is ageism. And if you're a leader out there and you're in your 30s, don't automatically forget about somebody who's in their 50s. You could learn from them. And if you're somebody in your 50s and you have a Gen Zer who grew up with technology, it comes down to being a great leader. Be curious, learn from each other, and grow and evolve. Not saying you have to be best friends with the person, but I think everybody can bring something, every generation can bring something to the table to help you develop. And also, it's best for your team to have a diverse team with multiple generations and go at it from all directions.
Yeah, no, I agree. And mentorship, for us at the NSLS, those are big pillars. The growth mindset that we just mentioned, learning when to pivot, mentorship is really great. And it's now I'm thinking about it, we always think of like the mentor as being like this older sort of like, elder statesman or stateswoman. And the mentee being this younger person. But you can actually reverse that. And the elder person can be learning something from the youngin as well, if you will, because there's something to learn on both sides. And I will also say I'm partial to Gen X because that's me too.
Well, now, I mean, you look 20 years younger than me, but I'll say that. But 100% what you're saying. Like I mentor a bunch of people, and I love mentoring the Gen Zers. The ones in their 20s or 30s.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Because I learn from them. And I feel like to a degree they even keep me young, right? And they have a different perspectives, and sometimes, and this comes into work, sometimes I've got younger people on the team. It doesn't even have to be younger people. And they have these ideas. And your first initial reaction is, no, this will never work. But you have to take a step back and really think about things. And I think great leaders will look at it like, okay, well, let's hear this person out because maybe there are better ways to do something or you can learn from them. And I just think that's what makes life exciting is to, surround yourself with different people who maybe have no common interest as you and just get curious and listen to what they have to say and learn from them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was reading watching a lot of your videos and reading a lot of your past talks, like the transcripts and stuff. And that was a key standout that you do mention a lot is the emphasis on great leaders are constantly evolving. And I think you can apply that just to life. Like we all should never declare ourselves completely finished. Like I want to literally be like 90 with a new fact someone drops on me like every day. Like it's just, that you feel your mind expand when you gain knowledge. At least I do. I really feel like my mind grows. I feel it. And I don't ever want that feeling to stop. So that's just my personal take on that, so.
When I interviewed a guy by the name of Doug Conant, who is retired, he was the CEO from Campbell and several others like that. They said, when you stop learning, you die. And it's been amazing over the years, on my podcast, but also the leaders I've been able to work with and see behind the curtains at LearnIt. They have an insatiable appetite for continuous growth. And I think a lot of it, though, Corey, has to deal with competitiveness. They want to be competitive. And they're also, again, I keep mentioning it, curious. And they want to, stay ahead of the game because if they're not, then you could just get stagnant and fall behind.
Yeah. And it's funny, it's more difficult now too, because like in my world, media, audio, video production, when I went to college for a lot of that work, I was in college with other college age kids learning all these software programs for video editing, for example, like Final Cut and Adobe Premiere Pro. Only to find out that now those courses were being like taught like in elementary school as like an elective to sixth graders. So my competition now is learning the software I'm learning in college when they're like 13, right? And then so you're right. I mean, if you look at that kind of sort of disparity between age and learning, it is literally a do or die situation. Like you're not going to stay relevant in a world that's teaching kids software like that at 12 and you're a grown-up. It's like a different world out there.
It is a different world out there. And I think that's one of the things, and you look at the AI world that we're in or we're going into, the technology and all those skills are super important. But you know what also is really important? Soft skills. Now, I don't like that. I don't like that term soft skills because, they're not soft. Whether it's empathy, communication, adaptability, creativity, these are all the skills. You pick up the technology skills, but the people who are the most successful, I believe, or they weave in both the technical skills, but also the ability to communicate and collaborate with others.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I've moderated quite a few conversations with leaders through our web series that we do different programs throughout the year. And that's been one that's come up quite a bit. And some people say they don't like that term soft skills. So one particular educator deems them durable skills because they are the long lasting ones. And when there's no computers, there's no electricity, what do you have remaining that's durable would be those skills that you have to kind of know innately, like the communication, collaboration, just having a way to be able to talk and convey ideas. I think that is in many ways lost on certain generations, maybe because they are so tied to their technology. I don't want to bash Gen Z, but there is that notion that is a lacking area for them. What do you think about that?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I don't want to bash him
Yeah,
either.
it's like it's a thin line.
Look, it's a thin line. I don't want to bash him either, but a lot of times if I go out and I do a keynote or I talk to the customers, yeah, they pull me aside and they'll say, how do we work with the younger generations? They're so stuck in their phone, and they have a harder time communicating. And I say, you know what, first of all, we're their parents a lot of times, right? So we have some of it the blame, but also let's leverage what they're really good at. Let's leverage the fact that they're much better at us than in technology and learn from them around then. And I think a lot of these younger generations, the other thing that they do is they force us to be better. They want to know what the purpose is and what value they bring into the organization. And they want crystal clear goals and direction sometime. And they want professional growth opportunities. And I think that if you switch your framework from being, okay, maybe they're tough to work with, to like, okay, they're pushing us to develop ourselves and be better leaders and run a better organization and leverage the skills that they have, I think that's the best way to go about it.
Yeah, because they are, of all generations, one of the most socially conscious, probably aligned with like the 1960s. I mean, where they are literally demanding corporate responsibility from brands before they even consider working for them. And they will tell you, in many cases, no, I'm not interested in your cubicle. I need remote. And we need to listen because they have the upper hand with the technology. So they kind of got to be flexible with that generation too. So they're in a really good position. So Gen Zers, if you're out there, use your leverage, get it, but just balance it out with a little bit of those durable skills too. I do want to talk to you about conquering imposter syndrome. That's another one that is one of those things that we all sort of deal with. And especially when you go into a leadership role. Like my first time becoming a manager as a copywriter for a national brand, I was mortified because I was like, I was always like thinking like they're going to pull the veil off and realize that I'm not good at this and they made a mistake. I was like constantly thinking that, and then I got over it and I did okay. But when it comes to something like, imposter syndrome, how do you help people deal with that?
So I first really dealt with imposter syndrome when I got to Pepperdine, and everybody, I was used to being always the best player on the field. Of course, I always played with great players, but then everybody was as good as me. And like I said, I ended up getting hurt and I left. And when I had the opportunity to go to Arizona State, a lot of people said, don't go there. It's, there's so many great players out there. But I knew it was my last opportunity to play really high level baseball. And this is where I built a framework that I've used for my whole life on how to overcome imposter syndrome. And it's really a 4-step framework. Number one, it's like, okay, well, what are you afraid of? So you get put into this role as a new manager. And so you first figure out, what are you afraid of? And I use this term called purposeful awfulizing. What is the worst thing that could happen? Okay, the worst thing that could happen is I fall flat on my face and maybe I lose my job. Okay, that's the worst case. Can you live with that? Yes, you can. Okay, great. I can get over it. So it's not life-threatening. So, okay, I understand what the label is, what I'm afraid of. So the very next step is hard work. There's no shortcuts in any of this or hacks. You have to be willing to put in the hard work. The next step is deliberate practice, right? So you get in on that job. I want to take a step back and just say, if you're put in that role, it's because people believe in you. So it's not your responsibility. You're there. Focus on doing a good job. So get back to step 3, which is deliberate practice. focus in on the areas that you think you're weak on or that you could do better at, and really just focus on that. It's easy to procrastinate and look at other things to do and, check emails. But if you're struggling with having difficult conversation, do role playing and have more difficult conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, let's say it's public speaking. You practice, you do all this. Like in baseball, when it's time to step up to the plate, you step up to the plate, you stop thinking about everything you've done because you've known you put in the hard work, you put in a deliberate practice, and you just learn and let go, right? So you give it your best shot. You might knock it out of the park. You might fall flat on your face. Whatever happens, number one, you should pat yourself on the back because too many people are afraid to get out of their comfort zone, and stick their neck out there and try things. And number two, you're going to learn from every opportunity, and you could always move forward. I look back on some of the things that in life where, I don't know, whether it's asking out a girl or trying for something that I just didn't do because I was afraid to fail, that I wish I would have tried differently. And what do you really have to lose a lot of the time? Just going out there, and if it's something you're passionate about, just go for it and make it a learning opportunity and give yourself more credit than I think a lot of people do.
Yeah, that's really great. You tap on a really important part. Like in most cases, if you've been offered an opportunity, it's because someone's already deemed you worthy. That's why they've asked you to do it, right? So it's so counterproductive at that point to be like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. Well, someone else thinks you can. So that's like kind of half the battle if you have someone who's rooting for you. But we've all been there. It's easy to kind of get in our own way, if you will. And I think the second part of that is, again, with all the successful people I've interviewed, they all have had a moment where someone offered them an opportunity. They were terrified, not sure if they could do it at all. And they said, yes, I'll figure it out when I get there. Right? Versus no, and then stopping their own progress. They just say yes, and then they just deal with whatever that looks like. And I'll do it.
Say yes and figure it out later.
Yeah.
And everybody has imposter syndrome at some point or another. And those who say they don't, they're either a sociopath or just lying, right? So it's just the way it is. And so I don't know. I've always kind of felt better about myself when I've stuck my neck out there and tried something. And sometimes hearing no isn't that bad, it's just, or not being successful, but you're never going to know until you try.
Yeah. Yeah. And on that same note too, there's an education that happens when you are, I don't want to say rejected, but when things don't work out as well as you had planned, there's learning there.
If things don't go the way you want them to go, that you take accountability for it. You don't always just make excuses like, oh, they should have, this happened to me, the world's happening to me. Take accountability. Maybe there's something you could have done different, and get feedback. There's a lot of talk about, giving feedback all the time. I think it's so important for all of us to learn how to receive feedback. Because if you're open to feedback, you're not defensive. You don't have to implement everything people tell you all the time. But if you do and are open to feedback, it's like fuel for learning. So get comfortable with failure, and then learn. And like you said, it's free marketing to see what you can want to try and experiment next time.
Yeah, there's an amazing girl, a young woman, I should say. She was a Disney radio host, young adult woman now a successful influencer. I had her on the show. She's part of the, I guess, Gen Z, younger Gen Z. And she literally, when she gets turned down for a pitch or a job, she will respond very, very academically and respectfully. And she will say to them, I was really looking forward to this opportunity. I understand that you're not going to go forward with it. Would you mind sharing with me what it was that made you take another direction or say no to me? Like I'm very open to know, so that my next time pitching to you or perhaps someone else, I can prepare differently. It's brilliant. And at first I was like, that sounds terrifying. She's like, it is terrifying because you also have to be willing because you don't know what they're going to say.
Yeah.
So like to your point, Damon, you got to also be like willing to hear the feedback when you ask for it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's great what she did. And a lot of times, from a work perspective, if we're in a competitive opportunity and we lose that opportunity, I'll reach out to the prospect that we lost to and say, hey, I would just like to understand what we could have done differently. I'm not trying to get you to change your mind and go with LearnIt. I just want to learn, what the other competitor did that maybe we could learn from, so we can, compete next time. And when you approach it that way, and just like that young woman, I mean, you get great feedback. Again, of course, like you said, you never really know what they're going to say.
Right. Yeah.
So you got to be open to that. But I think that's a great way to continue to develop as an individual or as an organization.
Yeah, it's helped her a lot. And she's also said in a couple times that response actually got her back in good graces with the client. And in a couple of instances, they actually did go on to work together because they were so impressed by her wanting to know how
it takes guts.
Yeah. It was really cool. So that's awesome. My gosh, we're already almost at like the 30-minute mark. I can talk to you all day, brother. So I want to keep going here. One more thing I want to talk about is this notion of you talk about the possibility spotting. And the constraints, turning constraints into possibilities, and also possibility spotting. So let's talk about those two things. Possibility spotting means what?
So what I mean by possibility spotting, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, everything doesn't always go as planned in life, right? So sometimes chaos happens or adversity happens. I'll give you a quick example. When the pandemic happened, which was awful, right? We had to pivot everything from in-person learning classes to remote. And at first, we weren't even sure, if our clients were going to stick with us. But I was walking up the hill one time going home, and I thought to myself, well, how can we make the best out of this? And I needed to hire more sales reps. And typically before, it was all local because we were an in-person business. So I said, okay, what's the possibilities out here? There's a lot of these organizations that are selling tickets or whatever, and they're not doing too well. So this could be a great time to find great talent. So instead of looking at something as like, oh my gosh, it's horrible, you got to learn to work within your constraints and find ways to make the best out of things. And so I went out and I hired 5 sales reps who worked at different, selling sports tickets or event planners and things like that. And I would have never had access to those people had it not been for this challenging situation. So possibility spotting is, again, if whether you're making a pivot in your career or, you're dealing with some adversity, find out what you can do to make the most of the constraints that you're dealing with and make the best of it.
That's great advice. And then I guess finally with that sort of, when it comes to the more corporate situation or a organizational growth situation, how does fostering a learning culture within an organization like directly contribute to company growth and the ability to stay competitive?
Well, from an employee standpoint, it doesn't matter what generation you are, one of the number one things that everybody wants is personal growth opportunities. Okay. A survey assessment after assessment shows that. And I'm not just talking about formal education. I'm talking about working for an organization where you create a safe space where people can go in, they could use their initiative and have some autonomy and actually try things, fail, and learn from them. Where the flip side is, command and control leadership. That doesn't work anymore, right? So, we need to be able to set people up for success, delegate to them, and give them opportunities to learn. And it really starts at leadership level. If you want to have a learning organization, then you as a leader need to be able to be humble and vulnerable enough to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go in, I'm going to learn these skills. I'm going to try things. Maybe things won't work. I'm going to delegate this off to somebody. If they make a mistake, guess what? I've got your back. Let's learn from this. And Corey, what I've seen over the years is when you do that, when you have an organization like that, people don't just show up for the paycheck anymore. They show up because they believe in the organization. They feel like they're part of the purpose, that they feel valued and respected. And ideas and creativity bubbles up from all over the place. So that's what I mean by trying to foster an organization that is a learning organization.
Wow, wonderful words of wisdom, Mr. Damon Lembi. And again, two-time best-selling author and host of the Learn It All podcast and the CEO of LearnIt. Damon, it's been a great conversation, and hopefully we can talk again, do a part 2 and bring you back on and share more of what you're working on and all the great stuff you're doing. So thank you for being here today with us on Motivational Mondays.
Thank you for having me, Corey. I had a great time.